What Welcome to this podcast of Center of Youth Nation. This is Pat LaRusso. I'm joined by my co-host Anthony Sino. And today we have a very special guest on our podcast, 32 years in the sports media, co-host of the Kool Button podcast, as well as the Power Play on XM NHL Network Radio, Mr. Steve Kouleas. Steve, welcome to the show.
Glad to be here. Hello, Pat. Hello, Anthony. And 32 years, not bad. I guess the difference between a job and a career. You get a career, you never have to work a day in your life. Although it is work, but it is fun.
No, excellent. So over your 32 years, you've seen a huge shift in sports media. When you started, it was television and print only. Now with the advent of the internet and everything that's kind of come from it, the sports landscape is changing. There's blogs, there's micro bloggers like ourselves, and tons of podcasts from, as far as your eye can see. How has the sports landscape changed for you, and where do you see it going into the future?
Well, I like to make the comparison, Pat, to like going to Baskin Robbins. When I went in 32 years ago, there was 7 flavors. And now there's not 31, there's 31,000. So that's a big difference. So as an example, I went to Ryerson for radio and television. I'm lucky enough to play varsity hockey. Some of my friends said, "Why quit?" I said, "Well, I got to get a job and get a real degree. I'm failing English." My English teacher said to me, "Who are you?" I said, "Well, I'm Steve. I'm failing." "Why?" I said, "Well, I'm on the hockey team." She goes, "What's that going to get you?" She was an old lady, and it was such one of those moments. And I'm European, so when older people tell you things, it hits home. So I went, "Yeah, you're right." So I played the 1 year, and then got my degree, got a job at TSN right out of school, luckily. And when we went in there, we literally got a piece of paper and put it inside the typewriter, and went, and I wrote for Gino Retta, like, okay, first period, Bob Probert to Steve Yzerman, top shelf, 1-0 Wings. Took it to the editor. We cut it on the video, the hard video, which was 1/2 inch back then, which was unbelievable technology. Wow, this is unbelievable. We used to have 2 inch, they said, then 1 inch. And we were like, oh, we had that at Ryerson. That stuff it's like turning a battleship around in Lake Ontario. So then I write it to Gino, and then Kool, what happened 2 nights ago, the Red Wings game? Well, they won 4-2. No, I think they won 4-1. Well, let's go to the newspaper rack. Who's got Thursday's paper? It's not in the date. Well, forget about it. Don't worry about it then. That's technology and research at TSN in 1990. It was my memory how Kool, you seem to know a lot. So that's how we did it. I'm telling you. And that is dark ages compared to where we are right now. So that's why I use the Baskin Robbins analogy. We have not 31 flavors today. We have 31,000. Back then, TSN, no Sportsnet, the regular channels, the old-fashioned click or the box, 29 channels, nothing compared to what we have today.
No, excellent.
So, Steve, I really want to ask you for myself. I've been an avid watcher of TSN as long as I can remember. Basically, I remember watching with my dad before I could even put on a pair of skates. So you yourself, TSN, and then eventually Sportsnet has been a very big part of my life personally, but as I'm sure a lot of our listeners' lives. So what do you think now we're going into the future? Like, people want to know where is sports broadcasting, specifically hockey, going into the future after you talking about where it came from or when you started? Do you see potential new pathways to provide content for the fans that these networks could be providing for us?
I think the future is literally up in the air, because what happens if Netflix or Amazon get involved? Like, imagine if the Leafs were on Netflix. Some grandparents would be like, what are they doing? I can't see the Leafs. Okay.
Yeah,
what do I got to do? Right, Anthony? What do I got to do to see the Leafs? Well, Gramps, you got to get this. Yeah, but they're paying so much money. And because of the Rogers deal with 4 years left, they've had some issues. I'm a capitalist, but the shareholder price is kind of changed what supply and demand was all supposed to be about. And now with 4 years left, will they go back to TSN? I mean, before you had Global and CHCH, there were other options than the sports channels. Now these conglomerates are huge and you need so much money to own the teams. And it's kind of nuts. So will it be more back on what was old school pay-per-view? Could it be on Netflix? Do they have to share like they did the Olympics, which they probably have to do because the costs are astronomical, from the teams to the salaries to everything else to the cable bill. And let's be honest, my daughter turned 22 today. I got a 22-year-old daughter. They don't have cable. The first thing we did when I moved out with my buddy when I was 22 is we need cable. We got to watch all the channels, and it's not the same. I want a huge 100-inch TV and watch the game. Everyone wants to use the laptop. The laptop's a secondary source for me, but for others, it's the other way around. So Rogers and Bell are seeing huge falls in subscribers. There's other groups out there. There's some that are legal or not legal. You probably heard about them. So I think the race will be to get as many eyeballs watching live sports as ever before. The good thing is people watch live events. Like Netflix is taped. I watch it when I want to watch it. Live sports is different, which helps Rogers and Bell. So the future is up in the air, how they can keep, younger people subscribing to all the streaming services. That's the game of the future. Because if those numbers go down, the leagues will feel the price financially. So this is the juggling act that we're in right now, Anthony.
So do you, sorry, Pat, I just had a quick follow-up there because I just wanted to, because you're talking about how they might have to share it because the costs are so astronomical. And I always like to compare the NHL to the NBA, and you can't really compare it as much to the NFL because it is just so big in North America specifically. But when I look at the NBA, it seems like they have their TV deals split amongst networks where do you see if we go back to a point where TSN garners a little bit more of those games as opposed to most of them going to Rogers? Like there's DAZN out there for those football fans. There's other streaming services. I see that as a potential revenue, an additional revenue generator for the league. I'm hoping they explore those options. But now that you mentioned something like Netflix, and then I think back to how the NFL's on Amazon, it does really open up another complete avenue for the league. So would you yourself, would you think that the NHL could maybe invest in a streaming service themselves to kind of get it off the ground that way, kind of get on the ground floor? Or do you think they would just reach out to someone who is already built that type of technology out and has that name brand recognition?
Yeah, I think the NHL has talked about forming before when TSN had started and before Rogers and while I was still in school, they were talking about forming their own hockey channel. And probably had they done it back then, they would have not needed Rogers and Bell. They wouldn't be as big. They'd have their own. They'd be Amazon before Amazon, and then they would have us. And then all 7 Canadian teams, or however, we've had 8 at the most, right? So
Yes.
it would all be on those channels. We would get those channels. You'd subscribe to those channels, and the hockey traditional channels would be screwed. But they didn't do it, and because they haven't, the infrastructure is in place at these other places that they probably couldn't do it. So they'd have to go to a Netflix, an Amazon, still a Rogers or TSN. Like when they want to do it on your own, you're going to take a hit for a while. When someone just writes you a check, then you're like, boom, and that's the big thing about doing it yourself or doing it somewhere else. In terms of splitting the pie, absolutely. I know for a fact, as a scoop on the table right now, TSN says, we will help you, Rogers, because you're bleeding to a certain extent. And the next 4 years of this deal carries 600 million. So that's more than 2 billion of the $5.2 billion deal is due in the next 4 years. Wow. And that's not good for Rogers. TSN has said, we will take it now, but we're going to have to get the Leafs in the playoffs. We'll split the other Canadian teams, and we must get the Stanley Cup final. And if it's Colorado and Pittsburgh and we like it, we'll take it. If it's Nashville and Columbus and we don't, you take it, and then we get to defer to the next year to get a Canadian team. And Rogers is saying, we're not doing that. And they said, okay, fine. So TSN is holding those cards right now. Next year, I could really see TSN having more games. Maybe hometown hockey is gone, or TSN gets Wednesday night, or whatever it is. But in the future, there will not be a one area carrier in Canada. It will be split. Remember, CBC doesn't really exist.
Yeah.
Rogers is borrowing CBC.
Yeah.
So then if CBC's out, you know, and in future elections, CBC might not exist anymore, whether you like that or not, or what's going on. So then we've got two carriers. It's only going to work if it's split, and a third carrier might be a non-traditional service like a streaming service. So it's kind of exciting. It's crazy to think about where we'd be at, but like the Americans do, CBS, NBC, ESPN, Fox, share, split, and you can pay more. It's like season tickets to the Leafs. If I own them, it's 10 grand. If the three of us own it, it's 3,300.
Yeah.
I go to less games, but I can afford 3,300. And then when we can't go to the games, we'll sell them. I think, guys, Anthony and Pat, that's the only way it's going to really work moving forward. But a great question.
And so this actually leads to another pain point. I saw quite a bit on social media, and a couple of my followers actually sent me a DM saying that the blackouts were killing them, that, you know, they lived in a certain part of Ottawa. My other fan lived in Saskatchewan, and they couldn't watch the Leaf game. Like, it seemed ridiculous to them that, you know, a national team like Toronto, who travels well, who has fans right across the country, can't watch a simple Toronto Maple Leafs game. So I'm wondering, as how the games get shared, well, are we ever going to get to a point where there will be no more blackouts and where fans from any team can watch any game?
I hope so. And the math suggests it should. If you're a Sens fan and the Leaf game is also on, aren't you a Sens fan first? And if that takes the peripheral eyeballs away, the Leafs write checks to Ottawa, Columbus, Florida, Carolina anyway. So you're cutting your nose to spite your face, if that makes sense. So you're lessening their market. So they draw 1 million regionally. Like, think about that, 1 million regionally. They'll get more than a TNT game gets nationally in the States. Remember, our women's got 4.9 million. The US got 3.4 there. That was the largest hockey audience in the world this year, more than any NHL game. And so we're still 1/9 the size, but outdraw them, you know, in terms of eyeballs. So the Leafs are the #1 regional team in the league, even though they're not as big as New York, LA, and Chicago in size. They're a bigger hockey market. That's just the truth. If you limit them, then you limit the base for them to write another check moving forward. I think it's silly. I think we can get to a point where all games, especially if the Canadian teams, are on all the time. Give everyone the entire buffet and let them pick. Because if somebody says, well, I like the Penguins, I can't watch them tonight, and there's all these other games on, they might decide, okay, honey, let's go to a movie. But if they can watch any game at any time, that goes to the NHL pie, Pat. You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
Yeah, and that's why that's a great question too. That helps all of us. But if I say I like the Red Wings and they're not on tonight, so and I can watch those other games whenever I want, give everyone their choice all the time. That's what I would do, kind of a la carte. I think we'll get to that because eventually they'll go, well, I'm an illegal streaming service, so I'm just going to.
Yeah, just going to watch it for free.
Yeah, but that is an interesting point, and a lot of people don't even think about that stuff.
Yeah, and it's funny, like, when you think about it, the NHL, especially from a league perspective or from a board of governors perspective, always bleeds and complains that they don't have enough money and we need a salary cap. And, you know, they're constantly looking for other ways to generate more revenue. And they seem to be kneecapping some of their larger markets, A, because of blackouts, B, because of the salary cap, because it really, I just find that it really causes a huge disruption in the market where you don't necessarily see in any other major sport. Where I struggle with that from a big market. Like, obviously I'm a huge Leaf fan and I want to see my team do well, but I also want to see the league grow. So why not put your biggest teams and your biggest markets on the biggest platforms to help it grow?
Yeah, and remember, if you go way back before all of our times to Pete Rozelle in the NFL, you know, the Green Bay Packers would have had a local deal and the Cowboys as well. But he was so smart that every NFL game is a national game. And the Leafs are almost like that because they don't have the home broadcaster, Nesson and Valley Sports, because they're done by the national networks and the national broadcasters, you know, even the regional, because that's almost like a national game. If you know what I'm saying, it's treated like a national game. So for me, if forget ego, the end of the day is if you can put the Leafs on a pedestal and it'll help the league, and you say to people in Barcelona and Moscow and everything else here, and apparently there was a time that 20 million Chinese had access to Hockey Night in Canada on Saturday, so they were watching the Leafs, which numbers the astronomical compared to numbers in North America. So give it to them and grow it. Grow all these plants all over the world. And they have a Liverpool, Barcelona, Man U, Cowboys, and Yankee type appeal. So use it, even though it might bug some Hab fans or Ranger fans. Too bad. Who cares if it helps sell, especially when they're good. When the Leafs win, that is great for the league. And we've never seen them go to the Stanley Cup final. Imagine what that would do and for numbers. So that's just the truth. And you said, look, you got Pamela Anderson. Do you put her in a poncho, or do you have her in the bikini on the beach? Like, you decide, like, what's gonna help viewership and excitement. So I think what you brought up is a great point as well.
On that, Steve, what Pat mentioned about the salary cap, it's been a very hot topic around the league recently. I find, just with the unfortunate reality that we live in today, it's going to be a flat cap for, I believe, 4 or 5 years at the end of the day, once it's all said and done. Obviously, the pause in the season could be taking a hit, or could be offering a hit to the league on their 5.5 billion projection. So I believe it's still locked in that they're going to get $1 million raise, but I follow a couple accounts that are pretty heavily following the CBA agreement, and they're saying that the players could end up owing like 600 million or something like that by the end of this current CBA agreement. And basically they're saying that it's going to be a lockout again, because the owners are just going to lock the players out because they're going to be owed too much money. They're going to ask too much in escrow, and then the players are going to have gripes about that. What I'm asking you is, do you have a solution in your mind that, and we don't have to go into the very nitty-gritty details for the sake of time, but do you have a solution in your mind where the league can sort of start getting back to normal quicker than what their current path that they're on? Because it seems like the hard salary cap isn't offering the parity that Gary Bettman promotes it as, because we are seeing these bigger market teams that are spending a lot more, using the LTIR space, getting to these cup finals. It seems like the parity comes from the 2 points and the 1 loser point standing, like in the standings, rather than the salary cap. So do you have a solution for all of this that can get the league back their money quicker?
Yeah, I mean, at least we're locked until 2026 in terms of labor peace. I think a non-starter, like, there's non-negotiables. Coach say non-negotiables are putting yourself in front of the team. Non-negotiable, with the kids growing up, is absolutely no drugs. There's no negotiation on that. Committing a crime, it's a non-negotiable. Anything less than 50-50 revenue with a hard cap right now, I think it's non-negotiable, because there's more teams that are poorer in the NHL than there are that are richer. And as much as the richer teams would like no cap or a luxury tax, the truth is having a cap does really also increase their profit margin. Because when the Leafs went to a cap and they could only spend so much, if they could right now, they might this year, if it was George Steinbrenner or Pat and Anthony and me, they might be this year we'll be at 147 million US. Well, they can't. They got to be 81.5. So the escrow thing is a problem. And as much as the players hate and don't like it, it's really arguing against a deal of equality. We made the deal 50-50, and we paid you 53%. So you owe us 3, which is 600 million. What's a better way to do it? Defer? It's like, my Visa bill came in, it's 1,200. Yeah, you spent it. You went out.
Exactly.
So what do you want me to do? You're going to pay the $10 and go 22% interest? That's Trudeau math. What are you talking about? That's not sustainable. We're going to go under. A lower rent's going to be worth $20, So I think that there is no solution. Like, a lockout's not going to help the league. A lockout's not going to help the players. Ask the players who've missed money in millions before. All you can do is help pay the escrow down. I see a non-starter, non-negotiable is changing the system right now. And under the previous agreements, Gary only needed 8 owners on his side. He's got more than 8 now. Like he's, you know, and they're only 8 that would be against them. What are they going to do? Go form their own league? And I say this, having grown up, been a baseball guy. I used to work at the Sky Dome and for Bob Costas and for Ernie Harwell and those guys. If the Yankees want to play the Red Sox 162 times a year, go ahead. Go play yourself. Find the Reds and Cubs and what the Cubs, they're rich. I grew up with the Pirates. They're all good. They're Kansas City Royals. I would just say this has got to change. And the baseball union's been strong and the players have fought because the owners capitulated among themselves. It's not going to happen here. The pie isn't as big.
Yeah.
It's a different sport. Still number 1 in Canada by a country mile. We produce, like, if the world was even, I think hockey would be better than soccer, football. But soccer, football is a poor man's sport. They don't know any better. So it is what it is. But from where we are right now, the math is we got to share, and we're not crumbling on the issue. And if we had no cap, then teams would what's it called? Constriction. They joined it like Columbus.
Yeah, exactly. They would.
Yeah, they joined Columbus. Yeah, we would have 32 teams. And if you really like that, the Rangers, the Leafs, and Flyers, and they did, maybe that's better for them. But we're expanding and growing, not contracting. That's the word. We're contraction's not that's an ugly C word for sports.
Go ahead. I got to follow up on that, Pat. But if you,
go ahead.
Like you going. So you mentioned growing the pie, Steve. Now, do you see another, like Arizona is a recent topic of conversation, right? And I've been following that, and I've seen some suggestions online where, because of this arena situation, if they don't get the deal in Tempe, it seems like they might, I believe the timeline would go, they would sell it back to the league, and then the league would sell it to a new owner who would take it somewhere else, and they would get an expansion fee. In terms of you talking about growing the pie, because the pie is there and it's going to be a 50-50 split, like you said, then by that logic, it would mean that the only solution to get more money into the system is to grow the pie. And it seems like that could be an area of getting more money for the owners in their pockets. But in addition to Arizona, I guess the second part of this question would be, do you see it like going to 34 teams or 36 teams in the next 10, 15 years? And do you think there are markets that could offer expansion franchises to the league?
Well, I mean, there's a danger of over expanding. I think 32 is a good number, and I think we'll be, I said on one of my shows, we'll be at 32 at least until 32. So 32 until 32. And like right now, if you gave Houston a team in Quebec City and say, that's okay, there's a pool, the AHL, everything else. Remember, every time you win and have winners, then you got the losers at the bottom. So when Carolina's good, it's okay. When they're bad, they struggle. Anaheim, we know the teams. We've been through it before. Look at San Jose. Like, they're going through it now, and there's nobody.
Florida's on the upswing now, but exactly.
But they're even having trouble now. Like, there's still a question mark. So I don't want more expansion. I don't think the league does either. I would have thought about saying to the players, listen, expansion money is the owner's money, but as an act of good faith to lower escrow, we will dip into the Seattle and Vegas money. But they didn't do that because it's a great buy, and they kept it. Arizona's situation is going to be ugly for 3 years. If it doesn't work and it goes back to the league, and then the league says it goes to Houston, then it goes to Houston. I watched Atlanta fail twice when I was younger. They were there. They blew it. They better not get a third chance, even though TNT's from there. I 32 until 32, at least, Quebec City will have to wait if Florida doesn't make it or another team moves. The expansion monies are huge, but those are one-time gifts to the owners. Yeah. And then that's it. Do I believe Houston would really work 20, 30, 40 years from now? I don't know. Would I invest my own money in it? Probably not. But it seems that they're the 33rd city ahead of Quebec even that's waiting because they're a bigger market. I think the more realistic revenue growth is going to be advertising everywhere. We see TikTok on the Leaf helmets. God forbid if they put it on the sweaters. Although the sweaters used to have CCM and Nike. And all, so we kind of advertise on the sweaters anyway.
They got it on the back now, right? It's a little bit less noticeable. I think if they do a shoulder patch or something, you can live with it. I think the gripe there, speaking from a fan's perspective, is I don't want to have to, if I want to buy a Leafs jersey, I don't want Loblaws, let's say, on the shoulder when I go buy it at Real Sports. If they got to wear it during the game, I guess you can live with it. I was okay with the helmets for a year. It looks like it's here to stay. But I, as a fan, I just think people don't want to have to buy a jersey with the advertisement on it. I think they'd be okay if the players had to wear it in the game. I don't know what your thoughts are. Please share if you have them. But
no, I think that of all the sweaters in North American sports, ours are the most sacred. I believe.
Yeah, exactly.
They're just better than all the other ones. I mean, the football ones made to wear under shoulder pads. Ours, you get away with. It looks good. Guys and girls wear them. That's the other thing about the analytics. Canadian women love hockey more than the American women love their sports.
Yeah,
so that helps us a lot. We're good at it. They play themselves, and then they're gonna have to have kids, so that's a great bonus. They're more involved, and it's a I see less women wearing that kind of stuff in the other sports, and it's a statistical fact. So do we want to put something on this sweater right now? We don't. But if the players say, well, that'll bring escrow down and there's more money, that's the balancing act that what we're doing. What might be a futuristic revenue stream, and I'm only learning about this now, is with these virtual reality goggles and these concerts that artists are performing in their basement. People then pay live streaming like $1, and 10 million people watch them. And with these goggles, you are at Scotiabank Arena, and I see you, hey Pat, you're virtually in the ninth row, and it's so realistic that instead of having, you can have 20,000 people at the game paying $200 on average, but then you can have 20 million people online paying $1, and that changes everything. But you got to buy the goggles, which apparently are very expensive. So that is something that one of my guys that are always 5 steps ahead said. It's a huge amount. So if the leagues got into that, we could all be at the Leaf game with our goggles and sit there and everything else and whatever. That could be something else maybe down the road. But slowly and surely in some aspects, the sweater advertising, I wouldn't want any of the guy. That's got to be a last resort, guys.
I hope so too.
No, fair enough. So I guess we've talked a lot about the behind the sports and behind hockey and all that business talk, but we do want to switch. We are a Leafs podcast. We do want to touch on some Leafs topics. So before we dive into some, more specific topics, Steve, if you could grade the Leafs season to date, what would you grade it?
A-. It's an honest A-. And the 2-4-1 stretch, which is now 3-4-1 because they beat Minnesota, was good enough to just let the people who need to know that Jack Campbell was really good at the start of the year. They're still giving up a lot of high danger chances. Really happy the penalty killing has improved so much, and this is without Zach Hyman. And that's just the truth. I'd rather have a great penalty kill than even the number 1 power play, which they still do have, which is outstanding. So A- that they need at least one more legitimate top 4 defenseman, which they would have bought in the offseason had there been no salary cap to bring it all together. But they know they're going to wait until the last possible second, because why bother going into the playoffs with the group that they have? They're down on Justin Hall. Timothy Liljegren is not ready yet. Travis Dermott is not improved. So they are going to pay with picks and prospects for the Ben Sherratts, John Klingbergs, you name it. If it was me, I'm all in both. I would not care about anything that is about 2022, 2023. Like I said, I'm a little older. It is nigh time. The time is nigh. I don't care about 2023. It's now. Johnny is aging. He's your second line center. It's year 4 with him. Auston and Mitch are special. They can score. The third line's better. They've got some grit, but they're not getting Gary Roberts and Wendell Clark. We all know in a perfect world, Roberts, Clark, Tucker, and Sylvain Lefebvre, they got a really good team. It doesn't work that way, Benjamin Button. It's not happening. So it's now, and then you hope some of the puck luck that didn't work. And if it was me, Florida in the first round, Leafs are the 3rd seed, come on, Florida, you got to win both games at home now. Now you feel some pressure. Leaf Nation's camped out in Florida for the games 1, 2, and 5. So the time is now. The season's an A-. They're really good, but they could lose in the first round in 5 or 6 games to Florida or Tampa. Anyway, the real goal is to finish first and play Boston. And then I would guarantee they beat Boston in 4, 5, 6, or 7 games.
So I guess I just have a one follow-up question to that, because I we had Rick Five and Mike Wilson from the Squid and Ultimate Leaf Fan podcast, and both of them gave a similar grading to the Leafs season. But where do you think is the discrepancy in the media and in the fan base? Because there seems to be large swaths of both the media and the fan base that just doesn't see what the Leafs are doing now can translate to the playoffs, or there's still this pessimism within both the media and the fan base. Kind of, how do we dispel that, or how do we break through that narrative that this is one hell of a really good team that just didn't have the puck luck the last couple of years?
I think what bothers people, examples that Jason Spezza had to go protect Justin Hall. Now he was on the ice, so Wendell Clark or John Tavares or other people weren't, but they don't play like that. And the game has changed so much, and it's going to continue to change as it's just more and more about skill. And that allows so many undersized players to do well, where before in the old days it would have been railroaded and hooked and held. But even as we've improved, the door's still open to take a man out and body check, and we don't do that. And in front of the net, the door's open to knock someone down. When Kerfoot went down on that Zuccarello trip, you got to swarm them. The game's over, and that's a good Brad Marchand to the Sedin's punch in the head. Like if it was me, my beer league hockey, and I was out there, I just would have gone to, and the people said, God love Kouleas. Finally, somebody stood up and did something. You can't wait for Wayne Simmons. He's the 4th line right winger. He's not going to play and be a major difference maker in the playoffs against the other elite players. He's not Tom Wilson. So I think what they get mad at is show me some grit and sandpaper. Then there's the woe me chicken little attitude, and they want something from the team that it's not. This team is have the puck. We're going to change. We don't dump it in. We circle back Engvall. We bring it back D to D. We hang on to it. We change their old Russian regroup. That's how we play. And the analytics show we break out, center breakout. We keep the puck. You can score a goal from behind your own net. And the Leafs do, and teams do it. And that's how modern hockey. So they play modern hockey. It's puck possession. What hurts sometimes is we've been on for 32 seconds. We've been playing around here. We've done the swirl. I think we have to take one to the net and get ugly. That's true. There's a time to mix it up that you say right off the draw, shoot. Oh, because they know we're going D to D. We're turning. Marner comes down high. All that's great. It's time to get less pretty and more gritty at times. Not flip to the Flyers of 75, but keep that part of it too, screening in front of the net. So I think the legitimate argument is let's add some sandpaper to the sushi and steak that this team really is. And that would go a long way for deception and for a little bit of, they might do something that makes you go, that's not them. And that's what people, I think, are legitimately are worried about, guys.
So I have a few points that I want to hit on with what you just said, Steve. First of all, on your grade and your little speech after, that fired me up. I got to say, we had a couple podcasts ago. We had a former Leafs employee, Jack Hahn. I'm not sure if you've seen him on Twitter a little bit. He essentially said something along the lines of what you said, where don't be worried about the playoffs. Go in, find the best team in the playoffs in the first round and go punch them in the mouth. Kind of like that old prison statement where as soon as you get to prison, you go find the biggest, baddest guy. So just got to say props to you on that. That was amazing. Second thing, and you talk about how team toughness, right? It's a very overused topic, I find, on Leafs Twitter, around the narrative around the team, all that. And I think with what you're saying about how Wayne Simmons can't be the guy, or Jason Spezza, they can't be the guy that Auston Matthews, Mitch Marner, John Tavares, William Nylander look at and say, hey, they hit me. You got to go and fix that problem for me. Because it isn't like, it doesn't seem like that has the same amount of impact. And I go, like you talk about what happened to Kerfoot yesterday, and another game in Florida, like you mentioned, they were losing bad to Columbus last night. I'm not sure if you saw the clip, but they're going to score on an empty net Cole Sillinger, the young rookie. He's about to put in the empty net, and Sam Bennett absolutely blew him up. It was over. He didn't have to blow him up, but he did. It looked pretty clean to me, and a whole fight comes up. And I'm just thinking to myself again, Sam Bennett is a top 6 player on Florida. You could say what you want about whether he deserves to be there. I think he's a great player still. But is Auston Matthews or Mitch Marner the type of guy to have the screw loose in their head and say, we're losing bad, I'm going to go blow that guy up now? Or to even flip it to another situation, do you think that they have the wherewithal to keep playing the way that makes them successful when another team tries to do it to them? Do you understand? Like, kind of fight through the bullshit. Like, that to me is what I'm harping on. It's like, okay, if you're not going to be the guy to go hit someone, you have to be able to continue to play the way that makes you successful when another team is grabbing you by the neck, like Ben Sherratt did in the playoffs, and still have that mental capacity to play through it. Do you think guys like Marner and Matthews, and to extend it to Tavares and Nylander, can fight through that kind of bullshit in the playoffs?
Well, I think you have to be realistic of how they can do it. So I do believe when you're not as strong individually to say, I'm Bob Probert and I'm going to beat the shit out of you. It's pack mentality. So in the moment you swarm with the 3 forwards, who cares about the face-off, and you bring the defenseman in, and you can get away with being Marner of hand to the chest. You know, I always say open hand to the chest, down here. You get right in their face, because then if you do and they punch you, then you're down and then there's a penalty and everything. So that's a swarm pack mentality, which can be done. And that's a realistic way of swarming Zuccarello. Well, if it was me, I just would have started punching Zuccarello.
Yeah.
I don't care about Tavares or Kerfoot. Get up. If that happened to Michael Bunting, he would have turned around and went after Zuccarello himself. So there's a little bit with Bunting. We mentioned Kerfoot, Spezza, Simmons, and then if it's a Sherratt, that would help immensely. That's one thing. The two is Auston. Stop the laughing and the if someone is hog tying you again, you got to start. Like I've said this before, and Michael Rupp and I brought it up on the air. If I'm Auston, there's a time this year I'm going to get a 2-game suspension for slashing, and I know it's not in him. I'm the moment when people say Auston Matthews suspended. What did he do? Well, he just got angry at Sam Bennett because at least played them 3 times.
Yeah.
And that's the setup to the first round, probably. And then Auston just gave it. Right? He's got a clean record. He doesn't take penalties.
Yeah.
The thing that when Theo Fleury came up from Salt Lake City and he was 5'7", 160 back then, he was a loose cannon frothing at the mouth, swinging his stick to let people know I'm not yet. And it's like, oh, do I want to fight that fight now? So the Leafs have to realize, we're middleweights, we're lightweights, but we can't act like a heavyweight. How do we do that stuff? Well, the lying, the laughing, that stuff, that's got to go. I would pack mentality at 100%. Go after some of these guys in the way you can do it. The guys who can do it, do it. And then the 16s, 34s, 88s, God help them in that regard, or 91. There's a moment that throw the punch, take the penalty. You're down in a game. You're up in a game. You're going to message send. Whatever they do will explode. We just said it's the Toronto Maple Leafs. If Tavares goes nuts and gets 2 games for a wicked slash, I would say that if they change none of that and nothing changes, they just give themselves a more difficult task, because the other teams will. Marchand comes in under the shoulder pads, above the kidney pads, and that you turn around at that point, and there we like something, and people say that's no, it's great. It's not. And if it's unorthodox to go, oh, I just poked the bear, and finally the Leaf. There's no Wendell to save the day. There's no Corson. There's no Roberts. If I don't stick up for myself, who's going to do it? If they don't stick up for themselves, who is going to do it?
Exactly. You're right. That is my sentiment exactly, is they have to find it within themselves to battle back. It's got to be, and it's almost like a light switch that, like you said, it's going to be a domino effect, because we all talk about, Pat and I and Lucas and all of our other members of our team on our podcast, we say, hoping for the playoff game style to change. You have to adapt. And it's almost like what you said, a domino effect. It's just going to take one of them to just to say enough's enough and do something. And I think at that point, the light's going to go off in everyone's head and be like, all right, this is it. This is the attitude around taking shit in between the whistles needs to change, because I don't know. I just think, as much as I don't like how the game is reffed in the playoffs, they just got to adapt, because we can't keep hitting our heads against the wall. And the definition of insanity is doing the same thing and expecting something different. So that's an excellent point to hit on, especially on the most important guys on the team. Go ahead, Pat.
Yeah, no. So I guess, Steve, the next topic was Auston Matthews. He's been in beast mode at least the last 2 weeks, more specifically, if we want to kind of, as we watch him chase down the scoring race. And now I think he's first after last night's games and goals. What has changed in his game this year, where it just seems like that margin between even him and Connor McDavid is slowly closing, where the defensive side of Auston Matthews' game is completely eclipsed anything we've seen from him in seasons prior. And I think that is starting to change the narrative of where he places now in the league superstar realm, or in that level. I guess, I would like to kind of get your thoughts on Auston Matthews' season to date, and maybe where you place him in that Connor McDavid debate.
Well, I think in watching all the games, you mentioned about the Sam Bennett hit or whatever. Yeah, I saw it. That's one thing about working at home, I guess. More time downstairs, games are on and everything else. So maybe we don't have a life. Maybe this is our life. But I think that in watching both of them, just recently, Connor kind of got his mojo back a little bit. Let's be honest, he's already had a Hall of Fame career. He's already got more trophies than most players do in the league. And maybe Auston will never win a Hart, or maybe he won. And Connor, they say with a horse, like he's been whipped so much. I saw in his face and his actions about questioning, honestly, sorry, Edmonton fans, being in Edmonton, losing the one ball left, or he would have been a Leaf. Taking pucks to the inside. Will we win? We don't have a goal. It showed. And while he exploded, even with the broken collarbone, and kind of has done this, I think part of it was like, oh my God. And I saw that this year. He started like a house on fire. Yeah. He was going to get 150 points. They went through their problems, 2-14-2 and everything. And I think that he was just like, he was like, hello, are you there? Well, the good part for Oiler fans, he's got that back, but they got their own issues. Clearly, the Oilers are not in the same category or tax bracket as the Leafs. That's just not the case. Since the moment Auston has arrived and he started with the house on fire, I think he is steadily improved in all facets of the game, including his defense, hunting down pucks. He is the best take the puck away from you, lift the stick guy in the league. And he doesn't take penalties. And the Leafs, for the most part, even notwithstanding their playoff failures, have just still really kept improving. Last year was a career year. This year, not in the Canadian division, I think he's even better, because they're playing better teams. They're in the real league this year. And he's just going like this. He does have 16 on his wing, which helps a lot, because I think Mitch Marner is a 95 to 100 point player. They work so well together, offensively, defensively, and on the power play. Auston just keeps getting better. And by him doing that on a better team without having the issues of we're not making the playoffs or we don't have the goaltending, like the Leafs are just still climbing, while the Oilers have kind of plateaued or come down, which is the truth. And I think I've seen that in these two guys. Really, there would be nothing wrong if 97 was here and then 29, which is McKinnon, and then Austin's here. Like if it was like that, and then at any moment they could change. We might be there. The difference is Auston still is a goal scorer who's a centerman, and McDavid is a centerman who can score but facilitates the puck better than anybody else. And I think for Auston to say win the Hart, now he doesn't kill penalties, but Huberdeau does, and their team's better than the Leafs. Kadri does, and the team's better than the Leafs. And Kadri, McKinnon's out of the lineup. We're 13-2-1 without him because of me. Like he is going to, and if you look at the standings, Colorado's first overall. Okay, well, who on this team's important? It's Kadri. Kadri's not better than Matthews, but might be having a better year this year. Same as Huberdeau, things like that. So who wins or doesn't on voting and everything. For Auston, he probably have to be the leader in goals, the gap in points, because he doesn't get a lot of assists still, is going to have to be in the realm if McDavid doesn't take off. And then the Leafs are going to probably have to pass Florida and Tampa. and have them finish first and say, oh, and then Auston will get that kind of love. So I'm not too bent on it because he's great. And whether he wins or is nominated or not, he's going to be one of the best Americans of all time. I said a few years ago, I think that he is the most skilled. Sorry, Mike Modano. Sorry, Patrick Kane. But he might not have a better team career than them because they've already won and Auston hasn't. Having said that, the Leafs are in a good spot with them. They're lucky they got him. People in Toronto have dreamed about winning a lottery and getting that guy, and they do. And if he's not already, he will be the best Maple Leaf of all time. If it hasn't happened right now, because he hasn't won, Sillaps, Dave Keon, Charlie Conacher, all that stuff. The Leafs have never really had that guy, but they do right now. But I've seen that gap close because of his maturity, his toughness in, winning battles. It's a different kind of toughness. He is using his body a bit more, and the maturity of his defensive game, which has turned into an outstanding 200-foot player.
Steve, I just want to follow up on your heart. I from that answer, I kind of parsed out your kind of guys in the heart race. So you got Huberdeau, you got Kadri, which we love here as Leaf fans because I'm personally still a fan of them. You got Matthews. You still got the Oilers guys. I think if they go off and because I don't know how many games Edmonton has, but I could easily see McDavid putting up another 70 points or whatever within that time frame. But I also want to touch on the goalie, Igor Shesterkin in New York. And the second part of that question is I want to get your thoughts on the Leafs goalies, but just on Shesterkin right now, do you think that he's got a legit shot at the Hart if the Rangers can grab like home ice in the first round? Just curious.
I think in old school, he's actually the most valuable player to his team. You know what I mean? Like that. The Rangers are not as attractive woman as you think. And as you get closer, there's a lot of makeup and there's
they got holes.
They got some stars, but the analytics also as the eye test. The Leafs got Shesterkin the first month of the year. Like how they lost that game. Well, they had Panarin, Fox, and Zibanejad on the ice when they lost the draw and scored. And really, the Leafs should be 3-0 against the Rangers this year. Instead, they've on paper lost 2 of the games. Well, Timothy Liljegren's mistake was
that was a bad night in New York too.
So Inar Hasek was Theodore's, which shouldn't have won that year. He was good, but again,
they got robbed.
Prices or whatever. He's right up with all of those guys. But now the schedule really gets tough for the Rangers. Do they want to play him all these games down the stretch when they play the NBC or TNT, ESPN? They want the Rangers. Oh, who are they playing? Rangers, Boston, Rangers, Capitals, Rangers, Penguins, Rangers, Carolina, Rangers, Florida, Rangers, oh my God. And then we'll see what they're about in those games. But Shesterkin, I can make an argument for any of the guys. Last night, Jeff O'Neill says it's Auston Matthews. I can still argue McDavid's the best player. And if he starts adding those points, that there's a sexiness. I could play Kadri, play Huberdeau, play Shesterkin. So that's what the last, 3/8 of the season's going to do. But Shesterkin's right now, if we got a stew of the real Hart favorites, Shesterkin's in it for sure. If we have 7, he is in it for sure. And I could make a case, as you could, Pat and Anthony, that he really is number 1 right now and could really be number 1 at the end of the season because those other teams are all, for the most part, still so good that they could survive, thrive, and make the playoffs without Huberdeau, without Kadri, without Matthews. The Oilers are a little different because Draisaitl can help, but if they lost McDavid, I think the Oilers are in the American League. But, the real truth, right? But Shesterkin argument, yes, it's sexy. I like it. And I have no problem with it.
Awesome. So now let's get back to the Leafs and talk about their goaltending. So Jonas Siegel, I believe, tweeted after the Montreal game. I'm not sure what the exact where they sit now. I'd imagine it's not changed much, even with Mrazek's good play last night. But the Leafs ranked 31st in 5-on-5 save percentage since December 1st. And it seems like the narrative around the team over the last 3 months, they had the COVID pause, which I'd imagine affected the team still because they were on a roll basically before Christmas. And then this whole pause definitely slowed that momentum. I'm wondering what your thoughts are on Jack Campbell. Do you think he looks fatigued? Do you think Mrazek should get more starts? I'm worried about it, not panic level, but I do want to see more from both of them down the stretch, because like we know before, like it seemed like the last 3 or 4 playoff series, the Leafs did not lost the goalie battle. Even though Jack Campbell wasn't the problem last year, they still lost the goalie battle. And at the end of the day, they got to win a series this year. So I want to get your thoughts on if they can win the goalie battle this year with either of those two guys.
Well, I think in the Matthews administration, they lost every goalie battle. And say what you want about Freddie or even Jack, they all gave up in at least the deciding game an absolute stinker.
Yeah.
The wraparound goal, was that Kouleas?
Are you talking about the game 7, the Boston?
Yeah, the Boston was pretty bad.
I know
Freddie
Freddie's
the other Bruin that's moved around, confused, but the wraparound goal, short side in Boston, that's how you lose series. Like that's and because they're a fragile team, they could never recover. They couldn't recover from the Atkinson goal. They couldn't recover from Gallagher.
The Kouleas goal, the Gallagher goal. I believe the Kouleas goal was actually like from top of the circle. It was like a screenshot that Freddie should have had it. It was on his blocker side. But there was another goal. I think it might have been DeBrusque or something. Like he let it.
Maybe it was Nola
Achari. You're right.
Achari was the wraparound goal.
He's let 2 in. The Columbus goal is pretty evident. The bad change, and then the one from the side, like that in the bubble. There was that one. There's the one in Boston that you mentioned with Kouleas. There's the other one with the Achari where 2 goals are below the dots, and then you got Campbell's goal against Gallagher last year, where it's a deflating goal. So sorry, I interrupted you, but go on.
And because they couldn't score, it makes it bigger. You say, I allowed a goal and we lost, and I'm getting the blame. I know, but the other guy didn't allow any. And because the offense didn't come up clutch and score, and that's partly also law of averages, playing the right way. Are they going to lose again? 2004, they're a good team. Have they learned from anything? Will they get a bit more breaks with the changing of the cross-checking crackdown in the playoffs? So if they don't call it, then if they get Sherratt, then he'll get away with it. Or they're going to call it and they're going to have to adjust, and that's more room for Marner and Matthews and everybody else. Florida's got some leakage. They don't kill penalties as well as us. They give up some goals. Bobrovsky could lose it. And so there's a lot to kind of digest. The biggest thing is Campbell was so hot and played like a Hart Trophy goalie at the start of the year. That wasn't sustainable. And he was hiding some of the Leafs' team defense, high danger chances, and defensive flaws that said, well, they've improved the penalty kill, they've improved the defense. Yeah, but, and from December 1st, we've seen the buts. So Jack's now come back to reality and probably played worse than he is. So that should level into some area. But if you don't level in around 918 team save percentage with your 2 goalies, you're in trouble. 909 is just C-. That's just showing up. They weren't as good as they were at the start of the year, the goalie or Campbell. They're not as bad as they are now. But unless they decide to protect these guys better and give up some offense, protect inside the dots, not outside the dots, not be as aggressive in all 3 zones, how Riley still charges outside his own blue line to a stationary winger outside the dots, who then they chip the puck to and beats F3 back because they weren't expecting to play, and the right defenseman Brody isn't. The fact they still give up plays like that I have in my video archives against St. Louis, Eichel, and Buffalo. The Bruins eat the Leafs on that play. Marchand stands. You understand what the play I'm talking about? Outside the dots, right outside the Leaf blue line. It comes to Marchand. Riley comes in. F3's reading it but slow. They tip it to Pasternak, who's flying in 2-on-1 with Bergeron.
Yeah,
my grandmother saw that play coming. How the Leafs play that style and all. There's a time, flip, Salming flip. There's a time, 2-1, we're up. There's a minute 30 to go. We're taking the lead into the third. Yeah. We're taking the lead into the third, right? An accordion. There's a time to out here, time to bring it in. And I think when you're go, there's a time that possession style, Engvall, you know what? We're up. We're TV timeout's coming, third period. You know what? This time, no, it's going in. This time I want to go back, and Liljegren loses, and you're like, I know that's how we play. But sometimes the safe play, like that's what I'd like to see them do, and that would protect their goalies.
At least.
Yeah, and that's got to come.
it's the situational, it seems like what you're getting at, it's the situational awareness that has to get baked into the analytical decision that it seems like each player is making. Like you mentioned with an Engvall, is, like it or not, I actually like the way that Pierre Engvall has played this season. Just to add on to him, I think he's played okay in his role. It seems like he's fit and even on the third line as well. But he's a guy that in the playoffs, I don't necessarily need him to turn back all the time, right? Because of what you're saying, it's that situational awareness. The analytics guy, like, I don't know whoever's telling him, Pierre, you're actually more successful when you turn back up instead of dumping it in. Whoever's telling him that is not telling him that, okay, when it's, like you said, a minute 30 left in the period, we cannot afford the risk of giving up a goal at that time when we're at TD Garden, when we're at Amalie Arena in Game 4. You know what I mean? So that seems to be something that also needs to be fixed. But in terms of the overall structure of how the team's playing, like you mentioned, rush chances that they're giving up a lot. Do you think that it's more what the coach is telling the D to do, where they're saying activate, pinch, puck pressure, close gaps? Or do you think they could also use some more help from their forwards that come back? Because it seems like they're not talking. Like you mentioned with Riley, if Riley's closing gap, he needs to have that support. So what do you think, it's something that Keefe needs to fix? Do you think it's just an effort thing? What's your thoughts on that?
Well, and if Keefe was right here and, they're the X's and O's expert, but we all know something that we've learned or been taught. I've been lucky through Chris King, Steve Ludzik, Mark Osborne, Craig, all those guys that we talk about. And then I've gone to the clinics. I've seen people who've discussed it, in the effort to score, you give something up. And there's a time, and I use Mike Babcock when they talk about the 2014 Olympics, and it's easier to do it in a 7-game tournament. The Carey Price didn't win the Olympics. I go to the Canada USA 1-0 game. I had Patrick Kane on. He's like, yeah, heartbreaker game. I said, Patrick, you guys had zero chance to score. Zero. F3 on that team was a little higher than the Leafs play. And people were listening, forward 3. So, puck goes into the corner. Bunting goes in hard. Marner's up. Matthews is there. So we come in a bit more to score the 3-0 goal to end the game, the first goal of the game, the 1-1 goal, all that, because that's our style. We live and die by that, as opposed to being a little bit higher, especially in safer situations. We won game 1 in Florida. It's game 2. It's 0-0. It's the first period. I'm going to stay F3. I'm going to stay F3 here. And when you give up so many rush chances, it has to mean statistically they're coming out of the zone with the puck on a 3-on-2, which means where's F3? And I think our gap control in the defenseman, and I've talked to some of my buddies like Austin Hockey a lot, is a little bit further back for whatever reason than up. And it might be F3, and it might just be a defensive posture. I'd like that gap with Brody and Riley to be a little closer than back, because watch Brody and Riley on the last 10 games, and when the zone entries are coming in, and then Craig Button did the game in Calgary. Leafs are one of the worst zone entry teams in the league defensively. And then Frey Ferraro talked about it, and I'm sitting there going, these two guys, and I'm telling these guys with 1,000 games, I need you to be a little bit further up, and I want F3 to be back able to support. Riley's doing that with no support in the neutral zone. Yeah. And he's doing that then, and I don't want him to do it then, but then he's not doing it on the rush chance. So if the rush chances don't improve, they're going to play a track meet with Florida, and then it's going to come down to who's a better goalie. So now you're going, exactly. You want to play that way. So that's what I'm seeing. I'd love if Keefe was right here to sit there and go, oh, good observation, guys. You know what you're talking about. Because if it's not, why after 50 games have you not improved it? A rush chance defensive team is on the coach. It's on the coach, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Matt Burns always said, my job is the defense. I can't get them to score. I can help. But I better be a good defensive coach, which he was, God bless him, and we miss you so much. A rush chance against is on Anthony and Pat, the coach. It has to be.
No. And this conversation's been great. Before we kind of wrap this up, I do have sort of one final question, because we are nearing the NHL deadline. I think as of this recording, we're probably 4 weeks out. With that said, I wrote a blog a couple of weeks ago about who I would like the Leafs to look at. I had names like Scott Mayfield out of the Islanders, Andrew Peeke from the Columbus Blue Jackets, and Josh Manson. I thought each kind of offered, that physical, that grit on the defensive end. Who would be your ideal trade target? Now that the Leafs have this extra cap money that they didn't anticipate having with Muzzin going down on LTIR with the concussion, where would you spend that almost $6 million in cap space, and how much of that would go to the defense?
Well, I mean, remember, Muzzin has to miss the whole year to save $6 million. So if you miss 20 days, it's a portion of the six.
Yep.
Right? So, and the math is hard. I hate doing it. And if a team's looking at a certain player, it's because they know they're going to hide money in Ottawa, hide money in Arizona, go through Montreal, or dump another contract. But what contracts left do we have? Like, you're not going to Kerfoot in a trade to get another defense. Like, the guys that they've got here, what Engvall goes, that's not enough money anyway.
Yeah.
So I think the team that you see now is the team they're going to take into the playoffs. Plus, who they add, nobody on the roster is leaving. So for me, I hear you on all the guys that you mentioned. I'm more of a Ben Sherratt fan. He's a left shooting defenseman who can play the right or left side. If he played the right side with Muzzin, he would make him better. I know that, Elliot had reported this too, that the Leafs have called about JT Miller up front. They had called about John Klingberg. Klingberg's a Leaf player, but he would be the second option if you already said, I'm all in. Nick Robertson's brother plays on Dallas. Do you want him for Jason? Yes. We want Klingberg. Done. And I've traded my first round and another prospect for Sherratt. And now you're going, I got Sherratt as the 4 and Klingberg as the 5-6 with Sandin. I'm just saying that if you're calling on these guys, they know that John Klingberg is not the answer to their problems. Their answer is Josh Manson. Yeah. That's an answer. Scott Mayfield, who I don't think is available, though. I don't think he's available.
Yeah, he's more of a wish list guy.
Yeah, he's more of a wish list guy. Like I watched him last year quite extensively, and I know, his contract is doable for Toronto. Would Lou kind of help out the Leafs? I don't know. Once again, it's all wishful thinking. But like, he was someone that I admired his game. I thought he brought the grit. He has some offensive side to his game that I don't think the Islanders have explored, really explored. And then I really liked Andrew Peeke for the Blue Jackets. Once again, he's young. He kind of ties into that Sandin. He's more of a long-term project. Obviously, he's only like 21 or 22. But I think it kind of, as you're looking at the Leafs defense transitioning, having him with Sandin and Liljegren, that's a pretty formidable defense as you're building out your roster in further years.
Yeah, and another name that was on the list because they're looking for their next Bogosian or Luke Shen type is maybe a Luke Shen. Justin Braun's names come up, but that and it's nothing against those guys. They're targeting Sherratt, Klingberg, Mayfield, Manson, and willing to pay the price because a first rounder and something is getting you. Oh, you want Klingberg? We want a top product. And I think that they're kind of pot committed. If they go in with this group and their only acquisition is God love Ilya Lyubushkin, then they're going to get Lyubushkin down to the playoffs in the first round. So, unless something big, dramatic happens. So they know they're this close. They know that they're this close. They got the house. They got the mortgage. It's all set up. But they're not going into the meeting with that beautiful Henrik Lundqvist suit and sneakers. They better get the Italian shoes. And if they don't, they're going to lose the deal when the agent goes, that's your defense? Yeah. No. So they know they're this close. They don't need us to tell them. They might need us to remind them about some of the things that I think we've done in the last hour. But now it's the game. Now the puck is dropped. Paul Tracy taught me, my Scarborough buddy. The flag drops, the bullshit stops. When the puck drops, the bullshit stops. And then it's up to you to get it done. 15 teams that make the playoffs will lose. Only one will win. That's why winning the Stanley Cup is the hardest, Gary is right, trophy in all of the world's sports.
So this has been fun, Steve. Thank you for your analysis and conversation. It's been great. I guess the next best thing is, where can our followers find you? How can they find your podcast? And, are there any other projects that you're working on that you would like our listeners to know about?
Well, remember me at Steve Kouleas on Twitter. The new podcast with Craig is Cool Button Hockey Podcast. Craig is great. Just two guys sitting around, not drinking beer, talking hockey in many different directions. And Craig has got so much experience and everything else. Sirius XM, Don't be cheap. Don't be listening to AM radio because it means you're about to die. So you need Sirius XM. Phone them up. There's free trials. You either have Sirius XM or you're listening to terrestrial radio. Come on. Music, sports, hockey, me, Howard, everything. Once you listen to that crystal clear sound, you don't go back. It's a difference between Auston Matthews on a breakaway or Brad Marsh. Thank you.
There you go.
This
Awesome.
has been fun. Thanks so much, Steve, for your time today. And, Anthony, any final thoughts for yourself?
No, just thank you, Steve. It's been great talking to you. It's really I always love talking Leafs, but talking with someone who I've personally followed along on television, radio, podcasts for a long time. It's been a treat. So thank you for taking the time.
No problem. We'll do it again as they go to the second round. How about that?
Oh,
Most
yeah,
definitely. Thanks so much, guys.
Okay.